Good day, learners. I'd like you to refer to page 2 of your first resource pack. I am looking at the answers today to the first activity on the political causes of the French Revolution. So that's page 2 of resource pack 1, based on the activity on the political causes of the French Revolution. I'd like you to look at this in conjunction with the sources. The sources appear towards the back of your resource pack, and that you will find in the addendum on the history resource pack at the back. The first page of your addendum has sources A and B, and we will look at those sources now in association with the first question. Your first question, well, let's look at the heading firstly. It says, study source A to D based on the political causes of the French Revolution and answer the question set. You will need to go back to the lessons we have done, and the first few lessons covered the causes. Look specifically at the political causes to assist you. Question 1.1 states, what conclusions can you draw about Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette from sources A and B? The mark scheme indicates that you need to provide 2 answers for 2 marks each. What conclusions can you draw about Louis XVI, who was king at the time of the revolution, and his wife Marie Antoinette from sources A and B? Looking at the sources, sources A and B are what we call visual or pictorial sources because they are images. Source A tells us that it is a painting of Louis XVI in his fine royal clothing. It's painted by Antoine Francois Calais, and it was his official portrait painter who did this painting, and this painting reflects how well the king lived and how well he dressed. Source B is a painting of Marie Antoinette in her fine royal clothing, painted in 1783. It also shows how well she is dressed. They use the term extravagantly. I'd just like to point out to you that it may not seem like a very impressive type of clothing to you, but for that period, the 1700s, it was regarded as very, very fine clothing. It would be regarded as what we would call now upmarket clothing. It was a clothing that was associated with people from the highest classes, the aristocratic or royal classes. Let's go back to the question, see what we make of. So what conclusions can we draw about Marie Antoinette and Louis XVI? Let's look at Louis XVI firstly. We need to provide just one answer for Louis XVI, and all you needed to say, using the information below the source as well as the picture, your answer should state that Louis XVI is portrayed as being a member of the upper class, the royal class, and he is portrayed as being regal, R-E-G-A-L. Regal means a person of a royal status. The second answer should relate to Marie Antoinette. Marie Antoinette is portrayed in a regal manner. She is extravagantly dressed, and she is also shown as a member of the upper classes of French society. 1.2. What can you say about Louis' personality from his activities in source C. I'd like you to now refer to source C. So this here is source C. It's on the right hand side, not on the left. As you see, this here is source D. This is source C on the right hand side of page 1 of the addendum. Let's go through the source. It says, the king is seen passing his mornings in his private room, observing with his telescope those who arrive at Versailles. He often occupies himself in sweeping, nailing, and unnailing. Some common sense, simple taste, an honest heart, sound conscience, that is his good side. A tendency to indecision, weak will, limited abilities, there is the contrast. Contrast means difference. So the question asked us, what does source C tell us about Louis' personality? I'd like you to remember that the word personality is referring to the qualities, the tendencies, the behaviors that gives a person a particular character. So here we're talking about his character. And if we look at the mark scheme, they want us to give 3 aspects of Louis' personality based on his activities. Your answers here would tell us the type of person he was. If you look at this here, he was a person who had an honest heart. He had a sound conscience. He had simple tastes. But also, he was a person with limited abilities. So any 3 of those would suffice. You could also include common sense. The following question, what conclusions do you draw about Louis XVI's daily habits from source D? Let's look at his habits. His Majesty's physical condition requires him to take plenty of exercise. So immediately the first thing we see is that he's supposed to engage in regular exercises. Having unusual strength, his appetite matches his powers. This is the menu for one of his usual breakfasts. At 6 o'clock, the king rises and asks what there is for breakfast. He's told, sire is another word for sir, a fat chicken and chops. It would be easy to poach me some eggs in meat juice, says the king. The king supervises the preparations, eats 4 chops, the fat chicken, 6 eggs in meat juice, and a slice of ham, and he drinks a bottle and a half of champagne. Champagne is a very expensive type of wine. He dresses, sets out to hunt, and returns with an incredible appetite. So reverting to the question, what conclusions can you draw about him from his daily habits? 2 answers for 2 marks. Here you can see that he engages in very extravagant meals. He seems to be somewhat of a glutton. Glutton means a person who overeats. And pretty much his day goes by where he eats, he hunts, and he returns to eat. So his day is filled with very easygoing, leisurely, and very lazy habits as well. 1.5. What impressions do you draw about Marie Antoinette from source 2E? Unfortunately, I left that source out, so I will come back to that at a later stage. I'm going to look quickly at the paragraph question. I had spent an entire Zoom lesson with you explaining the paragraph question and what was required. So what you would have needed to include there was a paragraph that was based on the reasons why the king and the queen would have been very unpopular by referring to the sources that you were given. And if you go back to the sources, when you think about it, and you look at these sources, and you think about the positions held by these 2 individuals, you would need to include, among other things in your sources, that Louis XVI had a personality that was not suited to being the leader of his country. He lacked one of the most important qualities that a leader should have, and that is he lacked the ability to make decisions. He had a tendency to indecision. So that should have been a starting point, because every day, several times a day, leaders are required to make decisions. So one of your first aspects to discuss in your paragraph would have been the King of France lacked the ability to make decisions. He also had a very weak will. Will means he was easily influenced and swayed by others, including his wife. The third inability he had was to focus on the needs of the people. He spent much of his time engaged in eating or in hunting, and very little time on the day-to-day running of the country. In addition to this, you could speak about the fact that the people would have been very frustrated because both he and his wife lived extravagant lives, as shown by the way they are dressed in the sources. So you could speak about they lived lives of leisure, Leisure, and they lived lives that were pleasurable, spent partying, dressing up finely, and engaging in activities that were centered around entertaining themselves. You could go on further to say that the king lacked the requirements needed for a person of the position that he needed to fill. He did not spend much time on political matters, and his decisions were largely based on common sense. And although he had a sound conscience, he was not able to deal with the serious crisis that France faced politically, economically, and socially.